UK government bans virginity testing but has still not apologized for past abuses on immigrants. CNN. Last week, the British government added a clause to its health and care bill that would make hymenoplasty or virginity repair surgery illegal in England and Wales. In November 2021, virginity testing also became a criminal offense, according to an article on BMJ Global Health. Virginity testing involves the visual inspection of the hymenal membrane of the medical professional. In some cases, the examination includes the two-finger test to assess the size of the vaginal opening. However, studies have shown no test or exam can reliably and accurately determine whether a woman has had sex, or the idea of such a test is largely sexist. In fact, the practice doctors believe is based on the misunderstanding of the female body and outdated notions of purity. The member of the British Parliament who proposed the changes to the law, Richard Holden, spoke of being tipped over the edge after a radio story of almost 2 years ago made him aware of those who inextricably linked practices that predominantly affect immigrant women in the United Kingdom. I couldn't believe it was still happening or that nobody has taken it up, Holden told CNN. I knew I had to campaign to change the law. A government spokesperson told CNN that the amendments were evidence or a commitment to safeguard all women and break down the pervasive myths that surround virginity and woman's sexuality. While the proposed changes has been welcomed, Britain has the checkered history with virginity testing. In the 1970s, immigrant officials did not safeguard all women, with the state conducting virginity testing on the same demographic it is now trying to protect. The UK Home Office tested women as a means of immigration control, and for this, a formal apology has never been issued. The clearance interview. Pallabi Munsi, director of the Indian Workers Association in the UK, remembers the day he learned about the violence taking place at UK borders. It was 24th January 1979, and the visually baffled young Indian man had come to the offices of the Southall Youth Movement, called SYM, seeking help. The man told the viewer that he couldn't fathom why his fiancée, who had just landed in London, was bleeding and seemed traumatized. He explained to the young SYM activist that while he had been waiting for his partner at Heathrow Airport, immigration and medical officials had winked her away for the clearance interview. When she finally came out of the room, the 35-year-old Indian schoolteacher wouldn't speak. Something must have happened to her in the immigration room, viewer recalls being told. It would take both men a few days to learn that she had undergone a so-called two-finger virginity test at the UK's largest airport. Pallabi Munsi, currently with the Indian Workers Association, was among the first to know about abuses at Heathrow. The schoolteacher's abuse received national attention after she shared her experience with the guardians, describing how a medical inspector had examined her to confirm he had not born children and was in fact entering the country as a virgin to be married. archival records from the Home Office seen by CNN shows that immigration officers suspected the woman was lying about her age and marital status and sought permission for the doctor to conduct the internal examination. After the story went public, the department responsible for immigration, security, law, and order, the Home Office, offered the young woman €500 amid news reports that her partner had planned to file a writ against the Home Office. The evidence of the proposed payoff was later found by two Australian academics, Ivan Smith and Marinella Marmo, while conducting research into discrimination in British immigration history. Additional sources, including a debate in the Houses of Parliament, would reveal that the Indian teacher's experience was by no means exceptional, nor was virginal testing only happening at Heathrow. We found that gynecological as well as other bodily examinations were conducted on South Asian women at British High Commissions in India, Pakistan, and Bangladesh, as well as Heathrow, Smith tells CNN. He adds that 1980 documents from the then Foreign and Commonwealth Office estimates that between 120 and 140 South Asian women are subjected to kinds of bodily examination for immigration purposes over the decade up to 1979. Of these, 73 were in Delhi, 10 in Bombay, and 40 to 60 in Dhaka, now Dhaka. The number of cases in Islamabad and Karachi remain unknown. Virginity examination are inherently discriminatory and when conducted forcibly result in significant physical and mental suffering, thereby constituting cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or torture. Independent forensic expert group. In March 1977, 2 years before the schoolteacher's case came to light, a journalist, Amrit Wilson, received a message from a friend about 16-year-old Pakistani national who had been detained at Heathrow. The girl had landed in Heathrow decked up in full bridal wear, as anticipating a wedding to her fiancé, says Wilson, who is now a writer and activist on issues of race and gender in Britain. Instead, the teenager was held at the Hermondsworth detention center for a week. At Hermondsworth, a young woman described to the reporter how she'd undergone a mandated sexual examination intended to prove that she was younger than she had claimed. In her 1978 book, Finding a Voice, Asian Woman in Britain, Wilson says the girl had told her dad they'd been two men, one of them white, the other spoke Urdu, and was probably from Pakistan. The examiner had alleged that she was not yet 16 and as a result she was deported to Pakistan. Wilson recounts the other harrowing stories, such as that of the heavily pregnant 18-year-old from Mumbai who came to the UK following an arranged marriage. The couple were separated at Heathrow, with the woman being taken to the Hermondsworth where Wilson says she went into labor while being superficially examined by the doctor and the nurse. Delays getting to hospital resulting in the death of the young mother's baby, loss of the child, and the trauma it caused were both the direct result of the gendered abuse in Britain immigration custody, Wilson explains. The physical and psychological harm from these interventions have also been independently assessed. In 2015, the independent forensic expert group comprising preeminent independent health specialists who provide technical advice and expertise in cases where allegations of torture are made, concluding that virginity examinations are medically unreliable and have no clinical or scientific value. They went on, these examinations are inherently discriminatory and in almost all instances when conducted forcibly, resulting in significant physical and mental pain and suffering, thereby constituting cruel, inhuman, and degrading treatment or torture. A joint statement by various United Nations agencies in 2018 echoes these views, calling virginity testing a violence of human rights. A form of state rape. A Joint Council for Welfare of Immigrants is one of the British organizations which has previously backed the calls for a formal apology from the state. Its chief executive, Satvir Singh, says the conclusions drawn from the test shows the UK Home Office officials were making all kinds of assumptions about South Asian culture. Rationale of the British government, Singh believes, was that if the married woman had been human, that was perceived to be intact. Perceived because the idea that the hymen completely covers the vaginal opening until it is broken during intercourse is a misconception. This was a proof that her marriage was a sham. If an unmarried woman's hymen was concluded to not be intact following the examination, immigration officials thought this must mean she was already married. The government did itself make this logic for using these procedures known. In March 1979, David Stephen, a Foreign and Commonwealth Official advisor, issued a report which states if immigration or entry certificate officials suspect that the girl claiming to be a unmarried dependent is in fact married, or if a woman arriving at London airport and claiming to be a fiancée of the man resident here, in fact a wife seeking to join her husband and avoid the queue for an entry certificate. They have on occasion sought a medical view on whether or not the woman concerned that born children, it being a reasonable assumption that an unmarried woman in the subcontinent would be a virgin. Immigration policy was a cynical ploy using the patriarchal values of Asian communities against them, says Lahila Gupta, interim director of South All Black Sisters, one of the groups that campaigned against virginity testing at Heathrow Airport. I would say it was a form of state rape, which was the invasion of women's privacy of the most appalling kind. Lahila Gupta is interim director of the South Hall Black Sisters, and a feminist group that was at the forefront of the protest at Heathrow. Sweeping unsavory history aside, by the end of the January 1979, men and women from the UK's South Asian communities and beyond were protesting at Heathrow Airport and on the streets of central London. A wave of disquiet had also swept India following report of the practice, leading to several protests in New Delhi. Indian author and activist Urvasi Patalia, who was then in her mid-20s, remembers the severe actions vividly. My mother, Subhadullah Patalia, with her feminist group Stili Sangash and the lawyer Chandramani Chopra, were at the forefront of the protest. All of us landed up in front of the British Commission in New Delhi, shouting slogans. My mother and some others who even jumped the gate to enter the High Commission to submit a memorandum seeking to stop the practice. The public objection to virginity testing on immigrants triggered diplomatic regions as well, with then Indian Prime Minister Molaji Desai writing to the British government, led by Labour's James Callaghan, and India's Deputy High Commissioner Pascal Alan Najaret reported at the time as having registered a strong protest with Ivan Lod, the Under Secretary at the Foreign Office. Yielding to the growing scrutiny and condemnation, the House Office issued a statement seen by CNN, dated 2nd February 1979. In it, the department admits using virginity testing and confirmed that the Home Secretary had now put a stop to the checks. Lahila Gupta left with colleagues at the Southall Black Sisters office in West London. The practice stopped, but the anger remains, fueled by the lack of accountability. There has never been an admission of guilty by the Home Office, Singh of the Joint Council for Welfare of Immigrants says. They never admit that they had done something wrong. The Home Office did not acknowledge CNN's request for comment on the EU's of virginity testing at UK borders in the 1960s and 70s, nor did it reply when asked if a formal apology was ever made to all those who were subjected to the practice. Almost 43 years to the day since the protests in the UK and India, Holden, the parliamentarian who proposed the restoration to criminalize virginity testing and humanoplasty is keen to recognize the positive actions of the state. Then and now, we stopped doing that as a government decades ago, but also now we are ending those practices more widely in society, he says. But Lahila Gupta speaks of the hypocrisy of the British state, which plans to safeguard the vulnerable woman today and yet sweep its unsavory history aside. Additional reporting by Leighton Anush Safar, edited by Mila Sintilgram.